This baker died holding his loaf of bread still warm from the oven when the ash hit. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted with such fury that it froze an entire city in time. This is the heartbreaking story of Pompeii's final hours told through the preserved artifacts and frantic last messages of its people. You'll discover the science behind the stone bot. How do plaster casts work? Newly deciphered graffiti revealing victims' last thoughts. Why some victims held keys even as ash buried them. The lost Roman city of Herculaneum, even better preserved. How modern 3D scans reconstruct their final moments. Timestamps, 0 o'clock. The morning of the eruption to 15. The Pliny letters. An eyewitness account 5:30. The stone bodies, how they were really preserved 8:10. The most haunting artifacts, 10 o'clock. Could this happen again? Credible sources. Pliny, the Younger S. Letters Pompeii, The Life of a Roman Town by Mary Beard, 2024 National Geographic Scans Discussion. Asterisk, which POMPEIR. It's morning in Pompeii. The sun is shining, birds are tweeting, and life is good. But little do the citizens know, high above them, Mount Vesuvius is rumbling, and in a few hours, it will unleash hell on earth. Thousands of people go about their day, not realizing it's Friday the 13th, in ancient Rome. And this is going to be one very bad day. Our first glimpse into the eruption comes from Roman nobleman Pliny the Younger, who was visiting his villa at the Bay of Naples when he saw a massive cloud of ash billowing into the sky. When he looked up, he saw a huge cloud rising above the neighboring volcano, Mount Vesuvius, obscuring the face of the entire mountain. As Pliny watched, the cloud changed shape, growing taller and wider, until it resembled an umbrella pine. From his villa, he could see pumice stones and burning cinders falling to the ground, like rain. Meanwhile, back in Pompeii, people are starting to notice the ash falling from the sky. Some think it's just a light dusting, while others realize it's serious and try to flee the city. But it's too late. Within hours, the ash will be over 6 feet deep and cover the entire city. But how did these people die? What does history tell us about the final hours of the doomed city? And what can we learn from their tragic end? Let's explore the stories of their lives and deaths, their haunting final moments, and the lessons we can take away from their tragedy. We don't know exactly how many people lived in Pompeii at the time of the eruption, so what happened to them? As the ash began to fall, people took cover, some sheltering in their homes or running for the hills. But there were so many people in the city that it was impossible to escape. By the time the ash reached 6 feet, most people had suffocated. So when the thick grey cloud descended upon Pompeii, many fled. But they were unable to get out of the city before the air grew heavy with ash, and they were forced to turn back. But why? What was in the ash that made it so deadly? The ash itself wasn't dangerous, but it contained small pieces of pumice and volcanic glass that cut and bruised people's skin and caused them to bleed. People ran for the hills, but they couldn't outrun the ash cloud. The ash was hot too, and burned people alive, but many still tried to escape, leaving behind their homes and possessions in a mad dash for the hills. When the ash reached 20 feet, it was too much for the people to bear. They collapsed from exhaustion and died. But some people stayed put. Many chose to stay in their homes and hide under their beds, thinking it would protect them from the falling debris. Others hid in public buildings like libraries and temples, hoping they would survive the disaster. But they were wrong. As the eruption continued, the ash fell thicker and faster, burying the city in a thick layer of volcanic material. After the eruption, the ash settled and the city was silent. The people of Pompeii were dead, buried under a thick layer of volcanic ash. Their city was destroyed, their homes turned to rubble, their possessions abandoned. In an instant, Pompeii was gone. When excavations began in the 18th century, archaeologists were shocked to find human bodies preserved in the ash. These bodies became known as the plaster casts of Pompeii. But how did they form? Over the centuries, rainwater seeped into the cracks of the solidified ash, mixing with alkaline minerals and forming a type of plaster. This plaster hardened around the body, creating a cast. While it may look like stone, it's really a mixture of volcanic ash and water. These casts have given us a unique window into the past, allowing us to see what the people of Pompeii looked like, how they died, and even what they were doing in their final moments. One of the most haunting discoveries made in Pompeii was a series of newly deciphered graffiti messages left by the fleeing residents. These messages, scratched into walls and door frames, provide a first-hand account of the terror and desperation of the final hours of Pompeii. One message reads, "Leave me alone. suggesting a desperate attempt to escape the clutches of the suffocating ash cloud. Another message, beware of the roof, warns of the danger of collapsing roofs as the tremors intensify. And yet another message simply says, I am leaving, expressing the mass exodus of people trying to flee the city. What's more, the discovery of dozens of keys found clutched in the hands of plaster cast victims has puzzled researchers. They believe the keys represent the owners' frantic attempts to secure their property and loved ones in the face of imminent danger. According to researcher Matteo Della Bifa, the victims likely grabbed the keys instinctively in a final-ditch effort to protect their homes and families. The keys also reflect the deep sense of loss experienced by the Pompeians, as they were forced to abandon their possessions and flee for their lives. And if you thought that was interesting, check out the lost city of buried under 65 feet of volcanic debris. Herculaneum was once a prosperous Roman city. It was smaller than Pompeii, with a population of only 5,000, but it was wealthier and more densely populated. Unlike Pompeii, which was buried in ash, Herculaneum was buried in pyroclastic flows, superheated mixtures of gas and solid matter that raced down the slopes of Vesuvius at over 100 miles per hour. These flows incinerated everything in their path, leaving behind only charred remains. Because Herculaneum was buried in pyroclastic flows instead of ash, the preservation is extraordinary. Organic materials like wood and cloth are still intact, as well as food and even human bodies. It's like stepping back in time to the days leading up to the eruption. Archaeologists have uncovered a wealth of artifacts, including frescoes, mosaics, jewelry and weapons. They've also found well-preserved bodies, including a man, a woman, and 2 children who were huddled together on a boat. Herculaneum was discovered in 1794 by a man who was digging a canal. He came across a fresco, and when he brushed the dirt off it, he saw that it was a painting of a Greek mythological scene. The discovery of Herculaneum has taught us a lot about what happened in Pompeii. For example, we now know that the people of Herculaneum were given more warning of the eruption than the people of Pompeii. We know this because they left behind evacuation orders that were written on bronze tablets and covered in wax. The orders told the people to leave the city immediately because Vesuvius was about to erupt. But despite the warnings, many people stayed behind. Maybe they didn't believe the warnings, or maybe they didn't think the eruption would be that bad. Whatever the reason, they paid the ultimate price. The people of Herculaneum died in the most horrible ways imaginable. Some were burned alive, while others suffocated. Still, others were hit by falling rocks or burned to death. They were also incredibly lucky to be preserved so well. If the pyroclastic flows had come just a few minutes earlier or later, they wouldn't have been so well preserved. To truly understand the horror of the eruption, we need to hear eyewitness accounts. Luckily, we have just that. Written by Roman nobleman Pliny the Younger, these letters describe the eruption of Vesuvius and the destruction of Pompeii. The letters were written to Pliny's friend, the historian Tacitus, and they provide a vivid account of the disaster. Pliny begins by describing the unusual darkness that had fallen over the land, saying it was as though an eclipse of the moon had taken place during the day. Then he describes seeing a cloud of ash rising above the neighboring volcano, Mount Vesuvius. As Pliny watched, the cloud grew larger and larger until it looked like an umbrella pine. He then describes the falling pumice stones and burning cinders, as well as the eerie silence that followed. Pliny ends his letter by describing the fate of Pompeii, which was completely buried in ash. You're probably wondering, could this happen again? Well, yes, it could. Vesuvius is still an active volcano, and it's overdue for an eruption. In fact, scientists predict that it could erupt again within our lifetime. But we're prepared this time. We have advanced warning systems that will alert people if Vesuvius shows signs of eruption, and we know that the people of Pompeii and Herculaneum didn't stand a chance. But sometimes we find ourselves frozen in fear, unable to move even when we know we should run. And that's what happened here. And it's important to remember that these people weren't just statistics. They were real people with real lives. They had families and friends who loved them, and they had dreams and aspirations. But their lives were cut short when Vesuvius. But their legacy lives on through the artifacts they left behind, which allow us to see what life was like in ancient Rome and what it was like to be a victim of one of history's most devastating natural disasters. Now it's your turn. Which Pompeii artifact moved you the most? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.